Hello and welcome to My View from the Piano Bench. We do this every Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. here on my Joe Holt's Notes YouTube channel. If you're new to this, welcome. If you're new to me, welcome. You'll find many other videos on my Joe Holt's Notes YouTube channel. In recent months, I guess maybe now we can say years because the pandemic has gone on, my focus in video posts have shifted from documentation of performances to things I'm doing from home and things that continue what were formerly live streams. They are recorded ahead of time, a couple of days before they are posted on YouTube, but the effect is the same. So this is a continuation of a series of me just kind of describing what it's like to be in this seat living the life I do, and I hope you find it interesting. Thank you for those of you who provide support and encouragement via the links available down below, the support page of my website. Check out other things while you were there. So we are calling this Knowing Who You Are. May seem kind of a strange statement, but when we're talking about artistic expression, that is really personal. In fact, it ultimately becomes specific to the one expressing. And so, if you're truly expressing, you're expressing from your unique self. So you want to get to know that person. So I'm going to say something up front that'll frame this, which is that if I had to read what I'm playing intuitively, in other words, when I sit down and improvise, if my path to that were not just improvising, but I had to read it off a page, it were written for me, then much of what I do would never get played. Hands down. So what I mean by that is, if I were to sit down and just improvise whatever, which effortlessly comes out of me. It effortlessly comes out of me on a couple of fronts. One, because I've spent my whole life doing it. You know, it's not something that doesn't magically happen. And of course, that was a very, very simple example. When I say effortlessly, my part of my brain is saying, well, because I was thinking about that. There's always a little bit of thought involved, but there's really not a struggle. Now, if what I just played there, or even what I played before, was written in the form of sheet music, which would not be, in terms of an advanced experienced player, difficult sheet music, I really probably wouldn't be able to sight read it and come close, and I might not ever completely get there in terms of playing what I did. But then the reverse is true for somebody on the other side of the street. And we'll talk about that a little more. It's the journey of a lifetime to learn about myself, especially considering that for the most part, I've had to learn on my own. My Shadow, a tune I've actually never played. Yeah, I mean, aware of it, of course, but and so knowing I wanted to do it, and it's not a difficult tune. For today, I'm just going over it in my head. I don't have to put something in front of me. And every time until the last chorus, I played the wrong melody, and then the last time I finally fixed it. So that word effortless, throw that out the window. But I think you get the idea. And everyone is someone, and no one is me. And no one is you. That said, there are, of course, traits and observable characteristics of people, of personalities. And we all fall into different personality types. There are people who are similar, there are people who are opposite. Opposites attract. Similar people find lanes in which they can travel that opposites can't. There's all these different dynamics. But even in the most specific of categories, there's still the individuality of ourselves. And when we learn who we are, of course, we learn what kind of person we are. But then we find out that, we have our own uniquenesses. There'll never be any of us. There Will Never Be Another You. That's a tune that is a Great American Songbook era standard that, for whatever reason, remains in the repertoire that is taught to young jazz students, primarily because of its inclusion in a particular fake book series, the real book, which is kind of like the not the Bible, but the reference manual in jazz education. And so all young kids learn that tune, and they learn it in a burning tempo, and it just becomes one of those chord progression templates that you just like play over. But it's actually a beautiful tune with beautiful words. So I always like to play it slower, even if I still swing it. There Will Never Be Another You. Now, when I talk about like knowing who you are and discovering who you are, these are explorations that many people, probably most people, don't really make. These are the explorations of the artistically minded, the spiritually minded, right? People who are on that kind of path, or the people who are exploring the relationship with themselves and everything around them. And of course, those of us in the arts, are, our own unique bird, right? We're not all alike, of course. There's all kind of different stripes of us, but there is that commonality, whatever the word is, temperamentally, culturally, spiritually, something. There's a difference between, the high school kid who's out on the football team and the one who's up in the stands sitting in the marching band, playing the fight songs. Very seldom, not just for the logistical reasons that the football game and the, requires both people to be there, very seldom are people in both places. It's happened. It happened with my son. But, it's completely different things, really. So those of us on that artistic, spiritual path, it's like seekers, right? And we're looking for the next discovery. And when we do, we see that it's bigger than we are. And then when we can begin to consider what it is that's bigger than us and what is bigger than us and everything in the landscape, we can begin to see how we fit into that, right? And, grow into the next thing. I didn't put this in my notes. I don't know if this actually fits here or not, but I'm going to say it. A line I use all the time. And if you know me personally, or, see me perform and had a conversation with me, this line often gets used. Now I've got two lines in front of me and I'm not sure which one I want to say. Okay, I'll say something related. The artistic temperament, depending on your view of the universe, is either a calling or a disease. Either way, you're stuck with it. It's a different path than normal people take, and I really respect and to some extent admire normal people, right? Now, for me, it kind of cuts in different directions. I didn't have a teacher to guide me into who I was. But I did have a teacher, my beginner piano teacher, who acknowledged what I could do and didn't tell me I was wrong. And I didn't ever even consider that until preparing this. And it's like Mr. Schmidt. He was, I think, 78 years old when he started coming to my house in his little red Mustang when I was 7, and my dad engaged him to be the piano teacher. And he was just an old, I say that respectfully, German man. And he was steeped in his classical traditions. And when he understood what I could do, he just acknowledged I can't improvise a lick, you know? But he didn't discourage me. Or even that, actually encouraged me, but just not telling me I was wrong was like all the validation I needed. Which made me think of an old Mills Brothers tune called I May Be Wrong, but I Think You're Wonderful. I may be wrong, but I think you're wonderful. Right? So, this is, well, ultimately nothing's off the subject and everything is. But, so when I started to play that tune, I think traditionally is an E flat. And I had it in my mind that I guess I would start in E flat and then I would go to F. I never got around to going to F. And I'm realizing it, you know, most of the way through, and it's like, let's not go to F. But then in the beginning, I'm thinking, well, maybe I want to start it in F because the song I played before, There'll Never Be Another You, is in E flat. Well, I started it and it wound up being in E flat and never left. Right? So that's a kind of thing that, you know, if I have to make that kind of decision ahead of time, I might just spin myself into the ground, you know. And of course, in another kind of personality organization, mindset I was going to say, whatever, you know, buttoning those things up is essential. And for me, just floating through them and seeing where they land is kind of essential. So it's kind of what I'm talking about. So this is a bit of an aside, but it's conceptually related to this. And I wrote it down because I wrote the word wrong in the title of I May Be Wrong. And music is not about right and wrong. Some people would say, of course, there's a right way and a wrong way. What I would say is it's about more or less effective. Like, here's how this could be more effective. Here's how this could go deeper. Oh, you're wrong. Like, that's invalid. No. And that's the path of growth. And like I said, I realized just in how many hours, or when did I write this? Last night or earlier today? Just in the time I've had to think about it, how totally important it was that Mr. Schmidt didn't tell me I was wrong. And I never felt a sense of being challenged about who I was, while I was challenged to be who I was in the environment I was in, totally. And that went on for a long time. But the one thing that Mr. Schmidt did say about improvising, well, he tried to talk about the diminished seventh chord. He didn't know what to call it, but he had some sort of tension chord that he called diminished seventh, which of course he meant diminished seventh, which he probably meant dominant seventh, but which is all cool. It's just like a label. You just put a label on something so you can talk about it. Now, ideally, the label is something that the person you're talking to also knows. But if it's your own unique label, that's okay. You know what it is, and you can, say it and recall it. So, it's all good. But other than that, the only thing he said was that in whatever adventures he would take in improvising, he found D flat to be the easiest key. And when you're like a young piano student, that's counterintuitive, because you think, well, the easiest key is where you have no black keys. It's the key of C. And his thing is how it laid under your fingers. Flat keys, and I don't usually often play in D flat. Not too many tunes are in D flat. But yeah, the flat keys lay under your fingers, better than the sharp keys, and better than the C, because in the flat, with the flat keys you have this contour, you can go up and down, you can feel your way around. So he would encourage me to improvise in D flat. So in honor of Mr. Schmidt, I'm going to play one of the few jazz standard tunes that is the stock key of D flat. So we all play it in D flat, and that's Body and Soul. Body and soul in the stock key, meaning the original key and the usual key of D flat. That was from Mr. Schmidt. So the starting point for anything you do is where you are. Right? You always start from where you are. And also, related to that, but deeper than that, is who you are. And who you are can determine where you are, but then who you are can take you someplace else. And that's kind of the point. And when you say where, because my mind just goes random places, that reminds me of the tune Where or When. It seems we stood and talked like this before. We looked at each other in the same way then, but I can't remember where or when, right? So in the world of performing music, there's lots of, inside baseball stuff that happens on the stage and behind the stage that people don't see. And a lot of wacky hijinks sometimes. And Joe and Paul Mederi would say, and they're completely correct, when you're engaged in just basically having a good time on stage, even if you're doing something inside, even if something's happening that the audience doesn't know what it is, but they're seeing you on stage engaged in it, enjoying it, or enjoying the whole thing, or cutting up, or making somebody laugh, or the whole thing, everybody joins in with you. They don't even have to be in on what it is, right? And, in different circles of music, it happens different ways. And some circles are pretty kind of, I was going to say stiff, but just, the wacky hijinks compartment really isn't opened up. But in other circles, it's way opened up. And in the Mederi band, it was often like, wide open. And I didn't take part in it very often. And one time that I did was noticed by everyone in the band. We were working with the Mederi big band. And it was noticed just because I usually wasn't the one doing it. And the target of the wacky hijinks during the performance is often the vocalist. And Paula Johns, who was the big band vocalist, and in fact, Paula's, I'm still connected with Paula after all these years, and she's coming down to the Mainstay in April. We're doing a Motown themed show for First Friday in April. How about that? But the big band was set up against the wall of the kitchen instead of against the larger wall that we usually were set up against, where there was kind of a stage, because there was construction going on. So everything was sort of upset. We were in a much tighter space, so you couldn't put Paula in front of the band. She had to be standing inside the band, which happened to be right next to me, right? And I don't know what came over me, but she's singing the song Where or When, and then she gets to the line, "The clothes you're wearing are the clothes you wore." And I just leaned over to her and said, "Yeah, because that's all I own." And then she couldn't sing. And not only did I make Paula laugh, which was the goal, right? You could hear the whispers going around the big band, like starting with the trumpets. "Hey, look, Joe Holt got Paula. Look, Joe, look, Joe." And it goes through the trombones and through the saxes and all the way through. So I don't have too many proud, wacky hijinks moments. So anyway, I like this tune. 1 second. I always forget something. Always, always, always. But I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't always forget things. All right. So, just like it's easier for me to find expression through spontaneity, it's easier for, say, a classical pianist to find their expression through interpreting the recorded music that's recorded with symbols on a piece of paper. Now, I use the word recording kind of deliberately because we think now recorded music in terms of sound, which is like, 100 years and change that we've had sound recordings, right? But we've had music for however long there's been humanity in some form, in some evolution of something, right? And how does the music get passed down? Well, it's played, it's remembered, but then in our culture in Western civilization, especially once we had paper, the printing press changed everything. The printing press changed everything, like the internet and digital technology is changing everything. And we are in the midst of just this whirlwind now that's not comparable to anything in history, but is in a template sense in terms of what the invention of the printing press was able to do. Now you could print sheet music and you could get that sheet music to people. And back in like the era of ragtime music, and of course reading music was a skill that many people learned, because that's how we accessed that sheet music. And song sales were measured in sheet music sales, not sound recording sales, right? And that whole era of hundreds of years of music being preserved on a page, I was going to say spawn this culture. That's not really the right word. Just the approach of creating music was to, have the most beautiful complex music, crazy complex music you can record in great specificity on a sheet of paper, right? And then you learn how to extract that specificity. And you look at each little part. And this is related to me sometimes using the analogy of a jigsaw puzzle. That when you're learning particularly a complex piece of classical music, you're taking all those parts, you're figuring them out, and you're basically putting the jigsaw puzzle together, right? You did this rhythm and this thing and this very difficult passage, and you have to practice a whole bunch of times, and the timing of this, and then you're counting E to 2 E and then the thing over here, and you slowly piece together this piece of music, like putting a puzzle together. And all the classical music and the popular music that happened before sound recordings, particularly ragtime music. Ragtime was very groundbreaking, and it combined cultures, and it was like kind of a foundation of sorts, or a blanket that lots of other things were carried on and grew from, right? And all of that favored, of course, those for whom that approach worked. And everybody can learn to do it. Just like everybody, within certain parameters, everybody can learn to read, to a certain level, or learn how to have a paragraph that you have to stand up in front of people and read, right? And learn how to do it and be effective. We can all do it. But there are some people who would be more effective speakers if they read that paragraph so they knew what they were talking about, and then put it down and started talking about it in their own words, their own pace, spontaneously. Right? That would be that other side of the street, the jazz side, right? The side that was always there, but because all of the music from more than 100 years ago in our culture was preserved on paper, we kind of get a skewed sense that that's what it's about. And I'm repeating an illustration that those who know me have heard me say many times. When a young child, a little young toddler learns language, they don't learn language because they were taught to read or write or anything like that. They learn language because they're hearing other people do it and they're interacting with it, and people are talking to them and they're processing what that is, and eventually they start talking. And you live there, and that's the other side of the street. So my next First Friday show with the Mainstay is a show that has an improvising pianist. That would be me. We could use the word jazz, but since jazz is a loaded word, I like to say improvising, or a classic jazz pianist, but somebody who is spontaneous, and then a very, very, very fine classical pianist who happens to live locally, and her name is Stephanie Lamotte. And I was talking to Stephanie for years, literally years, while Mainstay Mondays were going on, about doing a collaborative show about how does the classical pianist and the guy who can't keep the classical music straight save his life, how do they interact on stage? But the Chester River Chorale, for whom Stephanie is the assistant conductor and accompanist, rehearsed on Monday nights, or still does. And so it never worked out. But now I have a Friday series, and she's excited. And what we're telling people, and this is actually going to be true, that expect the ghost of Victor Borget to be at this 2-piano show, right? And Stephanie now is coming at it from, now she can improvise some, and I can read music some. That's most of my training is classical training. But, to me, I am in awe of Stephanie's ability to put like complex sheet music in front of her, and she just rips, and just, she can sight read a complex piece of music better than I could ever play it if I practiced for years, But then on the other side of the street, she's looking at me. It's like, what'd you do? What happened? And we do what comes naturally to each of us. So, one approach is easier for me, another approach is easier for Stephanie, because we're two different people, and neither of us are wrong. There that is. In fact, we've found what is right for both of us, but better than say right, let's say most effective. So Stephanie improvises less effectively than she can interpret the music, and even the real complex music. I can read music at a basic level. Like if you put a hymnal in front of me, most of the time I can read everything intact. Some of the times it breaks down and I have to conceptualize it, and I wind up, it's more of a conceptual reading, and I can like see what it's doing, and I can play what needs to be played, but maybe not exactly what's on the page. But then more complex than that, it breaks down quickly. I didn't write this in here, but I'm going to say it, and some of you know this. And if you were at the Mainstay Monday show, Mainstay Monday, I'm in the wrong series. The First Friday show, the initial one this past week, which was a lot of fun. Stephanie was there, which is really cool, and I announced the show, and kind of just for like a laugh, and just put things in perspective. Here's what I did. I announced that Stephanie is going to be performing the first movement of the Grieg Piano Concerto in A minor, which is insanely difficult. She had mentioned to me that she had performed that back in the day with an orchestra. I don't remember where. I think I read somewhere where she had done it. And I just had to open my mouth, right? You know, I said, well, let me take a look at the orchestral reduction, which is the orchestra part condensed into a second piano part, but you keep all the parts of the orchestra there so that you can perform it accompanied, but if you don't have an orchestra, you have another pianist who does it. And Stephanie's like, oh, okay. She's thinking like, well, that would be great, but it ain't gonna happen. Or at the very least, she was pleasantly surprised when I looked at the music and I was a little overgenerous with myself. And I said, I'll figure that out. Let's do it. Okay. And man, I have been working my butt. In fact, this week is like, I got to get myself to play it front to back with Stephanie by the end of the week in a rehearsal. So yeah, this is my little review from the piano bench right now. In fact, where'd it go? It's up here somewhere. I put stuff in front of it. Yeah, it's all printed off from my computer. But I'll tell you, as classical music goes, that accompaniment is not, super, high level, crazy difficult for the real classical player. It is for me. It's the long road. But then I look at what Stephanie's playing. It's like I could never play it in a million years. It would never get played if it's written. And for Stephanie, it's the opposite. So super cool. So neither of us are wrong, and we can go to the other side. But when we are ourselves is where we can be that person and have that expression and do those things that we can do and we're supposed to do, and that's what we're talking about. Expression. So one thing about this, when I say learning who you are, your personality it's a global thing. I'll always say, global might not be the right word, but I think you'll understand what I mean. That you can learn just about everything you need to know about a person by how they play music, by how they express themselves, right? This is an expressive thing. And expression is expression. So if I'm talking to somebody like a student or just somebody randomly, we're talking about improvising versus reading music, I'll ask them, all right, which is more comfortable for you? If you had to speak in front of people and give a speech, a 10-minute speech about something, would you be more comfortable writing the speech down, rehearsing reading it so you can read it and deliver it well, and reading it from a prepared text? Or would you be more comfortable like really getting to know your topic, your subject, practicing in the car, just talking about it, and then like maybe writing some notes so you remember what to talk about, and then you get up there and you speak extemporaneously? And the answer to that question is likely the answer to the question of where you're most effective playing music. And are you an improviser or are you not? So if you have, or are you, I want to say not an improviser, are you somebody who, and I don't want to say he's good at putting jigsaw puzzles together, that's not the point too, has that skill set to be able to reassemble that music. I'm in awe of that. And if somebody from this side of the street says they're in awe of me, it goes both ways, because it's all valid. So if you've only learned one way to do something, and now let's generalize it to anything, but of course this works with some things more than others, but let's say anything, but especially expression. If you only learn one way to do something, you might be, I can't read the word I wrote. Looks like the word is, you might be judging yourself, but I think that I would say if you only learn one way to do something, you might be shortchanging yourself. So sorry that didn't make sense. I need to learn to write more neatly when I'm scribbling at the last minute, right? Sure. So I'll close with something that Stephanie and I are going to do, which is going to be fun in the concert. And course, some of you don't, but if you live close to the mainstay, I gotta not say this too many times, or even if you don't live close to the mainstay, but you can get to it, especially now that my series is on a weekend night, makes it easier. Everyone should experience this venue. I mean, even if you're in some other part of the country, at some point, like, come to the mainstay, stay in the area, check out a show, experience that venue, whether it's my show or not, and then email me and let me know what you're doing, and I'll hip you as to things to do around here. It's a wonderful area. But anyway, boy, am I getting off the subject. Talk about being who you are, right? Stephanie and I actually have a lot of experiences in common, and one of them in our, because we've both been full-time musicians our whole lives. One of them is that we were music directors in churches, and so Stephanie has this book of really nice arrangements of hymns that are used for like preludes and postludes and stuff, and so we're going to morph that particular hymn, Praise to, and she's going to play it from the arrangement, and we're going to morph into, I don't even know how I'm going to do it yet, but it's going to be like a gospel feel. Whatever, we're going to come up with that, right? So, let me take a different hymn and give you my approach. So if you take Amazing Grace, and I should have opened the hymnal, but it'll be like this. Right? So does that hymnal, which is actually a 4-part choral version, does that represent Amazing Grace? Well, sure, but so do many, many, many other things. And for somebody who reads music, they'll get the best arrangement of Amazing Grace they can get if they're a pianist, which wouldn't be from a hymnal. And then you would learn it. And that's how you would play it. For me, the process is build it. Build it from the melody. Because everything about what you're playing comes from the melody. Even when you depart from the melody and you improvise, that melody is still underneath, supporting everything. Now, this is a different subject, but since it's happening, I'll say it. I'm playing this melody and I'm talking to you. Because this melody is coming from a different place within me than the little dialogue I'm making is. Which is why I can do it. Because I'm not thinking about this, especially in the way I would be thinking about this if I were reading music. I'd be, like engaged in that same part of my brain that I'm using to speak from, right? Which is why I was just going to demonstrate, like saying the names of the notes and all that, and I realized I can't do that and still pay attention to talking to you, because that is on top of each other. These things are alongside. Because that's my process. And we just build it. Something like that. Learn who you are. Discover. Grow. And whatever you do. Thanks for being here. So, particularly if you're new to me and you have any interest, if you go to my website, on the first page is a sign-up sheet to receive my monthly newsletter. I don't sell or distribute addresses to anyone, and just let you know what I'm doing if you're curious. And hope to see you again. Thanks so much. Thanks for being here. Have a great week, or see you tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, the same channel, for Piano for My Friends. Thanks.